Renown. Renown is a multiplayer survival experience set in a vast and ever-changing medieval world. Players begin with nothing, gather resources, build a kingdom and fight to survive in the hopes of becoming renowned across the land. At its core, Renown is a first-person medieval fighting game, with a strong emphasis on competitive skill-based combat. Renown takes the most enjoyable and popular aspects from contemporary open-world survival games, which include building, progression, and social politics. These are then combined with close quarters, skill-based combat to create an immersive and engaging multiplayer experience. The Inquisitor. The Inquisitor is a dark fantasy adventure game with action elements that makes you face difficult moral choices. The game takes place in an alternate version of reality, religious. Inspired by the Inquisitor book series by Jacek Pajkara. Nailed to the cross and close to death, Jesus was consumed by an absolute fury. He freed himself and violently avenged all the unbelievers. Centuries have passed and now an army of fanatical inquisitors impose faith by force in a church bathed in blood. You are Mortimer Matterdon, an inquisitor in service of God, sent to the city of Königstein, infested with mysteries and sins. Solve various cases and crimes against faith while uncovering the truth about a dark evil from another kingdom that is trying to enter the world of the living. Pentiment. From Obsidian, this game is a historical narrative-driven game focusing on character development, heavily stylized art, and choice-driven storytelling in early 16th century Bavaria. Players will play as Andreas Mahler, a clever illustrator caught up in a series of murders in Tassing and Kearsau Abbey over the course of 25 years. Players will be responsible for conducting their own investigation to decide the fate of the community, but each decision will have lasting consequences and inexorably draws Andreas closer to the center of an underlying conspiracy. Songs of SIX. Songs of SIX is a fantasy city builder where you start off as an insignificant colony and build, scheme, and fight your way towards a metropolis and empire. The mechanics are complex and true to life, where small events can spiral into the collapse of kingdoms. Easy to learn, but impossible to master. It's set in a low fantasy world with graphics aimed at stimulating your imagination.
The village. It was already there.
Sengoku Dynasty. In medieval Japan, ravaged by famine and war, you head to the legendary peasant kingdom to recreate a loving home for your daughter and secure the legacy of your family. Become a legendary figure in the tumultuous world of the Warring States era in Japan by following a path of a charismatic leader, skillful craftsman, famed warrior, or a spiritual master. Encounter fully fleshed NPCs, forge alliances and expand your influence by performing surprising and emotional quests. Trade, romance, start a family, build a community, manage villagers. Be a leader.
Beautiful and peaceful. I couldn't believe it.
Plague had ravaged the British Isles.
Going medieval. Going medieval is set in an alternate version of the 14th century, after 95% of the world's population has succumbed to the plague. The few survivors now set about building a new civilization. The game is not only based on a real era, but even on historical events. However, it changes their course a little to give you enough freedom. Strictly speaking, of course, you get an end-time scenario. In terms of gameplay, however, it feels like the real Middle Ages. The building aspect is the main focus here. You build your own fortress during this time. To do this, you provide shelter, defend the inhabitants of your land against animals and bandits and deal with other problems in a world in which there are no longer any laws.
And into a brave new medieval age.
Thrive, Heavy Lies the Crown. Thrive, Heavy Lies the Crown, like many games, is based on the real historical Middle Ages including its dark aspects, but it is not set in our world and thus does not commit itself to a specific time period. It combines elements of a 4X strategy game with real-time combat and building gameplay. The focus is above all on survival. And not only in massive battles against enemies of your kingdom, but also against the dangers of nature. Decisions are particularly important here. Not only do you have to make them quickly, you will also feel their effects just as quickly. Thus you will gradually develop into a ruler who cares about the well-being of the people, or into a tyrant. And you will even recognize this in the design of your city. Noble's Life Kingdom Reborn. Noble's Life Kingdom Reborn is set in the very uncertain times of the 100 Years' War in Europe and at the same time at the beginning of the outbreak of the plague. At the same time, the Church is losing power and Great Britain is on the brink of civil war. The game offers a unique mix of simulation and strategy. You take on the role of a nobleman who goes to war for his king and must make numerous decisions that affect not only the course of the conflict, but also the villages under your control. You decide for yourself which path you want to take. And depending on this, the gameplay also changes. You can fight on the front lines as a feared warrior or leave the fighting to your soldiers and retreat to your own chambers. There are no clearly defined limits here, however, and you are free to find your very own style.
Your kingdom awaits.
Knights of Honor 2, Sovereign. Knights of Honor 2 also doesn't commit to any explicit phase of the Middle Ages, but is very clearly set on Earth, with a twist. Basically, Knights of Honor 2 presents us with a fantasy of an endless Middle Ages where technological advancement never leaves the era of castles and longbows. You are unceremoniously crowned king of your European lands. But even a king cannot do whatever he wants. In Knight of Honor 2, you also have a crown council at your side, which you fill with trusted merchants, diplomats or spies, hopefully your own. From here you can expand your empire, go on crusades or deal with revolts. Knights of Honor 2 could be the perfect mixture of the highly complex Crusader Kings 3 and the classic Total War. You will experience similarly varied stories as in the strategy Colossus from Paradox. At the same time, battles are also fought in real time. Especially those who have been waiting for a new medieval for 15 years should put Knights of Honor 2 on their list.
And protect your sovereignty by all means.
12th Senua's Saga, Hellblade. Hellblade tends to be overlooked when it comes to games set in the Middle Ages. For there is no trace of castles or knights here. In fact, however, it falls into the early Middle Ages. In the first part, Hellblade dealt with the bloody invasion of the Picts, a people from northern Scotland, by Nordic conquerors. This invasion took place towards the end of the 8th century. Senua's Saga, Hellblade, continues the very personal story of the Celtic warrior Senua. In the first part, the woman plagued by the horrors of the invasion strove to rescue her murdered husband's soul from hell. It all sounds pretty supernatural. And Hellblade also features more monsters than you might expect in a historical game. But the trick here is, Senua is haunted by hallucinations. Hellblade thus constantly questions what is really happening and what is only taking place in her own imagination. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notified about new content.
Sure.